the cup and the league all to be won. Everyone knows there's a job to be done, and with a team so fine, I'm proud they're mine. We'll be singing this song. For real bars from Birmingham Athletic, and now we are on song. For real bars from Birmingham Athletic, and we'll go marching on.
The Dunfermline Athletic Former Players Association podcast is sponsored by Starna Apparel. Affordable and stylish clothing born on the terraces. Listeners of this podcast can get 10% off their order by using code PODCAST at the checkout. Just head to www.starnaapparel.co.uk.
Welcome to a journey down memory lane that's sure to ignite your passion for the club we all adore. This is Walking Down the Holbeath Road, the podcast that reunites us with the legends who once graced the pitch at East End Park. I'm your host, Mikey Mokkiewicz, and I invite you to lace up your virtual boots as we step onto the hallowed turf of Dunfermline Athletics history. This podcast is your ultimate destination for all things Dunfermline Athletic former players, and we'll be sitting down with the heroes who made our dreams come true, scored unforgettable goals, and carved their names into the hearts of Par supporters. Each episode will deep dive into the stories that shaped their careers from the early days to the highs and lows of football. From promotion battles to cup triumphs, these players have witnessed it all, and now they're ready to share these memories and all the dressing room tales with you. In this episode, we catch up with former midfielder Billy Davies, who made over 100 appearances for the Pars during his 3 seasons at the club. Starting his playing career at Rangers, he would go on to have spells in Sweden and England before returning north to sign for Dunfermline in 1990. During his time at the club, he played under 3 different managers in 3 seasons and would play in the 1991 League Cup final against Hibernian. After his playing career, Billy carved out a successful management career, starting at Motherwell, moving on to Preston, Derby County and Nottingham Forest. So sit back, relax as we walk down the Holbeath Road with Billy Davies. So Billy, thanks for joining us on the podcast. It's a pleasure to be in your company. How's life?
Life's good, Mikey, and I've got to say it's a real pleasure to sit down and talk to you about what was a really fun time when I look back at my time at Dunfermline, and I'm looking forward to this.
Good man. Right, before we start, we're going to do 5 shoot style questions like the old magazine. So because this episode's going out in December, the first question, what's your favourite Christmas song?
Well, I think you can't talk about a favourite Christmas song, Mikey, unless you talk about Slade. And also, you know, the other one I would say to you is the old Shakin' Stevens, Merry Christmas everyone. I think these two, Merry Christmas everybody, I think these two are the ones that get you up onto the floor and get you moving at Christmas.
Aye, the old classics. Brilliant. Who's your favourite current player in the game?
Well, I've got to say there's obviously a whole range of people that you would look at, but the one that I think is popping out just now is the boy Martin Odegaard at Arsenal. I think he looks to be a right top player. You've also got people like Rodri at Man City and Foden at Man City. I think they look excellent players, and of course I don't think any team is worth a mention without Kevin De Bruyne.
Brilliant, good choices there. You mentioned Phil Foden there. I was reading yesterday he got signed at 4 years old for Man City. What's your thoughts on kids getting signed that young?
Well, it's the way the game's going, Mikey, now. You know, it's obviously it's changing, and because of all the academies and all the things that's going on at clubs, you can see that they're trying to bring people in as young as possible. And of course, we've now got the integration of the kind of away from school as well, and combining the school along with the training and preparation. So it's just the way it's just the way the game's evolving, Mikey. We've just got to accept that's what's happening.
No worries. Away from football, what's your hobbies?
I love to golf. I love to cycle. Believe it or not, Mikey, I love to spend some time in the garden.
Right.
I'm a very keen gardener.
Green fingers.
Don't know an awful lot about gardening, but I like going in and mess around and do that. But I've got to say, probably my favourite is certainly on that golf course.
Popular option, to be fair, with footballers and former footballers.
Yeah, definitely.
What's your favourite holiday destination?
Well, the one place I go on a very regular basis, I like to go to Dubai.
Right, nice.
The guaranteed weather. It's been a lovely holiday resort for me and my family over the last number of years. And I've got to say, Mikey, we do thoroughly enjoy pinning myself at the beach, no moving for 14 days or whatever, and coming back and feeling refreshed and ready to go again.
And now your kids are grown up, you can do that now. You can relax by a beach.
Well, that's it. The kids are up now, and the only problem I would say to you, Mikey, is that the kids that have now grown up still want that trip to Dubai, and they want it paid for, which is even worse.
Brilliant. And if you'd not been a footballer, what do you think you would have done?
Well, there's two things that I love. I must admit, I do love computers, IT, graphic designs. I love all that kind. I love spending time on a computer. Self-taught, may I say. For a long time I've been doing that along with my video editing stuff, which I also love to do. And the other thing I love, Mikey, again, not very clever, but love it, is I love dealing with wood. I love sawing and drilling and hammers and nails and that kind of thing. I get a wee kick out of things like that when I'm involved in dealing with the wood stuff.
So it's creativity, really, eh?
Yeah,
love being
I
creative.
think so. I think if it wasn't any football, then I would think that's the kind of two areas that I would probably go: joinery and the kind of IT stuff.
Talking about the video clips piece, I remember actually watching a Football Focus piece on you. I think you were at Forest maybe 10-15 years ago, and you had a room in your house, didn't you, with the Apple Macs? You used to do all the video editing, and you were quite ahead of that, weren't you?
I was probably started it. I was one of the few at that time. I spent a lot of money building my own kind of video analysis room. And I've got to say, Mikey, although you've got the guys in the club who do all the kind of video stuff, I do like to do my own. I like to go back and spend the weekend looking at training, looking at games, even other teams. I look at other teams and I love to kind of break down set pieces, what kind of set pieces are getting done in the world, and look at all different kind of shapes and patterns of games. So the video analysis, video editing stuff is something that I've got to say, even today I still do it, and I love it dearly.
Brilliant, mate. Right, we're going to start your early life. So you're born in May 64 in Glasgow. So what was growing up in Glasgow like for Billy Davies?
Well, it was obviously it was feet on the ground. It was very humble upbringing. Born in Govan, moved from Govan into Pollock, and back then, Mikey, there was no hiding places. You know, it was pretty tough streets and a lot of discipline. Mm-hmm. But I've got to say, I really do owe my parents a big thanks for the wonderful childhood that they gave me. Although we didn't have a lot, they worked very hard, both of them, and they gave me a very happy childhood. But it was certainly very interesting growing up in the streets of Glasgow, as you can imagine.
Makes you who you are, though, eh? A lot of these guys, like Alex Ferguson, for example, his Govan background, he speaks about what he learned in that early life, like he put into his later life, didn't he?
Well, I think it does help you, you know, and there's no doubt that when you look at your upbringing, then you were taught a hell of a lot of things. You're taught how to be humble, which is a very important trait in this world. No matter what you do or where you go, you never forget where you came from. You never forget. You know, I can remember, Mikey, getting back to these days and your mother and father fighting like dogs trying to pay light bills but what they done is they clubbed together. They worked very hard. They gave their children happy times and gave them everything they could. And I think that's a great education, certainly for me. It certainly played a huge part in who I am today.
And what's your memories of football growing up?
Well, very interestingly, obviously, started very early and joined a boys' club called Pollock United Boys' Club. I spent a good number of years there and played with a lot of great people at that club. And was then picked up by Manchester United. When I was involved in Pollock, I was very kindly asked to go down to Manchester. There was a number of other clubs that were chasing my signature, and I eventually, from Pollock United, went on and signed a 5-year contract with Manchester United. Took a bit of homesick, unfortunately, Mikey, but had a great time at Manchester with Dave Sexton. Went down many visits, went across to Switzerland in a youth tournament with Mark Hughes and Norman Whiteside and Stephen Pearce, the goalkeeper, and all these other, Clayton Blackmore's, all these guys were on that trip. And I've got to say, it was a real great time, but unfortunately, when you take that homesickness as a young player, I eventually come back and signed a 5-year contract with Rangers, and the rest is history.
Going back to the Man United thing, what was it like? The Cliff training ground was quite iconic down in Manchester. It must have been an amazing experience as a kid going down there.
It certainly was. You get into that Cliff training ground, and I remember, and don't forget back then, in the 70s, it was all the Martin Buckens and Gordon McQueens and all these guys. It was a real quality side, with quality players, and the Cliff was interesting. I remember sitting at lunch and breakfast, and the famous thing was obviously the milk machine that they had. I remember the big milk machine that everybody would go towards, and sitting in the same room with first team players, you would see these big stars coming in, and you're just a young boy at that time, and you're in there training with them, training beside them, and watching them working. And then of course a very good guy, Dave Sexton, a wonderful gentleman, Dave Sexton. The way that he coached, the way that he would give time to young players, it was a real education, making. It was a real pleasure and a real privilege to be down at the Cliff, and of course being in amongst that whole environment was first class.
Brilliant, mate. And then you mentioned that 1981 you joined Glasgow Rangers, who your boyhood team was. So what was that like, joining your heroes, really? Well,
I've got to say, Mikey, at that time, coming back from Manchester, and you take that homesickness, and then of course your supported team coming. My dad was a big Rangers fan and went to a lot of the games, and of course when Rangers come in, straight away you think to yourself, this is a good opportunity. And I signed a 5-year contract, and it was actually John Gregg and Tommy McLean that I joined. John Gregg was a real good guy as well. Wee Tommy was very clever tactically and very clever in the game, but as a young player, again, you join a very disciplined place. I remember running up and down the stairs. I remember running up and down the sand dunes at Gillane. In the training ground, wee Doddy McDonald, Ali McDonald, every morning he would come into the training ground, and I'd be standing, and he would rub his studs down the back of my legs, and he would kind of have a go at me and say, come on in, you want to take me on, kind of thing. So there was all that kind of, with the experienced players like the Peter McCloys, the Ali McDonalds, the Tommy McLeans, the Alec Millers, the Colin Jacksons, Derek Johnsons.
Legends of Rangers.
Legends of Rangers. Just don't forget, a year or two earlier, they just won the 77 European trophy. So to get in there again with that experience, and again, the Bobby Russells and the Davy Coopers and the John McDonalds, it was a real education, but more importantly, Mikey, I would say very disciplined, real discipline, and that's the one thing that Rangers taught me.
Yeah, and what about your duties as an apprentice or young player? What were you tasked to do around the stadium?
Well, today we would be hung, drawn and quartered for what we done back then. Because you were washing cars, you were cleaning boots, you were brushing terraces, you were clearing snow, and you done all these things, as well as obviously trying to make your way in football. But that was just part and parcel of things back in the the late 70s. Early 80s, because when I just joined before my 16th birthday, believe it or not. I actually made my debut in a Canadian tournament, the Red Leaf tournament, against Ascoli of Italy, and that was just before my 16th birthday, which was a great experience. But when you start getting into the pre-season, I remember running around Bellahouston. I can tell you the runs that we done, Mikey, because I can remember them dearly, and it was a great education as a young player.
Yeah, and I've got here at 17 years, 115 days, you made your competitive debut against Brecon.
Yes.
September 81. So what's your memories of that one? At 17-year-old.
Well, don't forget back then, and I've got to honestly say to you, they were tough games, Mikey.
Yeah.
They were tough players. And it didn't matter whether it was Brecon or whether it was any other club. Back then it was, even junior sides. I remember playing some pre-season games against, for example, Benburb juniors. They had good players, Mikey. They were real good players and tough players. So the Brecon experience, you're thrown in there, it's 1,000 miles an hour. there's tackles flying everywhere, and all of a sudden there's a ball playing midfield play. You soon realise I need to find more to my armoury because this is tough times.
Well, you spent 6 years at Ibrox, but it was quite frustrating for you, wasn't it? You didn't play a lot. I think you made 23 appearances over 6 seasons, so was that frustrating?
Yeah, it was very frustrating, obviously, but certainly when I joined with John Gregg, and that was I think around about 79, 80, signed that 5-year contract, and then in came Jock Wallace. Jock was a different type of manager, a real disciplinarian Jock, and you find yourself at these big clubs very difficult to break in, and then of course Graham Souness came in with all the kind of big name English guys, and it became very difficult. I found myself really needing to move, Mikey. I was never going to get a run of games or get that opportunity to build confidence, to feel relaxed, because you're always thrown in away at Brecon where you need to obviously play, and then you're taken back out again, and you're put back in and you're taken back out. So I think for any young player, I think consistency, confidence and feeling part of it is the key, and unfortunately I never got that.
What did you learn in those early days, especially from the likes of John Greggs and maybe a Jock Wallace? And obviously you moved into management later on, so was there anything you kind of picked up in those days that you then...
Well, Greggy was a very difficult one. Now looking back at it, at the time you don't realise Greggy was going in beside all his teammates, if you like, because he took over very early, and then Greggy went in there with Tommy McLean and Joe Mason, Stan Anderson, people like that, excellent coaches. But Greggy was kind of chipped in, I think, first class guy, a real winner obviously, good man manager. And unfortunately, it may have just been the wrong time for John Gregg, because obviously getting in beside players who just recently were his teammates.
Must be quite difficult that if you have to discipline one of these guys, eh? And they were your teammate 5 minutes ago, and now you're the manager. Very
difficult, and it's a very difficult task, and particularly at a club like Rangers, where you've really got to get in there and be very strong and very disciplined. So again, without really knowing the background or details, Mikey, as a young player, then you just go on with your job and you don't know this is a legend who's now the manager, and you just go into training every day and work with the players and do what you can. But as you get older, you soon realise the difficulty that John Gregg had getting in there as a former player, just playing with all these guys, and all of a sudden chipped into that manager seat. Jock was slightly different. Jock Wallace, he was a real experienced disciplinarian. He's one that led by the iron fist, and he certainly was one that when you're walking along the corridors, you make sure you walk out the way. And he had a lovely guy beside him called Alec Totten. Tots was a very nice man, another one that was good personality and good man manager, but a different type. And then of course Graham Souness, Graham was coming in again, player manager, a very fierce character, but he had big plans. Obviously they were going to shake up the club, they were going to bring on the Mark Hateleys and all these guys, and they were going down a different road.
How do you think the guys would manage in the game today?
Well, I'm sure they would agree that they wouldn't get away with half of it.
I think they might struggle a little bit.
Half of it they got away with back then. It was a different approach, and I got to say, Mikey, they would be the first to admit that this is a whole new ball game here.
Definitely.
There's too many cameras on you now and too many angles.
Can't get away with anything.
Absolutely.
So after you leave Rangers, you have a wee spell in Sweden. So how did a Scottish boy end up in Sweden?
Well, it's very interesting. I was contacted by a guy called Ian McNeil, ex-Spurs guy, and it was Ian who had a contact in Sweden, and he asked me would I be keen on going out to Scandinavia to play, and that's kind of how it came about. Before I knew it, I was on the flight, very naively going across to Swedish football, knew nothing about it, knew nothing about the weather. Within a month I found myself not just in inches of snow but feet, sometimes metres of snow. And of course, Mikey, being 5'6", it was difficult sometimes to look over the snow, unlike yourself, that big 6'5" character. So I've got to say it was a whole new experience. But again, Went to school every day to learn the language. Great to understand a different culture. Training was different, preparation was different. It was a whole new ballgame as a young player, but I thoroughly enjoyed my time over in Sweden, and eventually got transferred from a team called Jönköping to EF Elfsborg in the Premier League, and it was a great experience. It was good to learn the language. It was good to understand the culture. It was good to recognise, pre-season and training, running through snow, and some of the things that they'd done, Mikey, was just some of the things. It was just incredible, but it was a great education again, part of your, if you like,
different experience.
I think every player, if they get the opportunity, should try and play abroad at least once, because it does open your eyes and it does give you that good experience.
What was the quality of football like?
Well, back then it was part-time, but it was interesting because what happened is these guys chose not to be full-time footballers. They were actually very interested in their work, which finished at 4 o'clock, so they got up very early. They went to their work at 4 o'clock, and then I think they started around about 5:36, Mikey, and then come in and they actually, believe it or not, be trained full time. So it wasn't twice a week. These guys were full-time footballers at night, but they didn't want to give up their jobs, and very cleverly made a decision that they wanted to keep their day job, keep their work going, and then come in. I think it may have been, 4, 5, 6 times a week, Mikey.
Fair play,
and they trained, believe me, they trained probably, and you know yourself, the Scandinavians are super fit, so they didn't mess around. They were super fit boys, very, very aggressive, very strong. And back then I was fortunate enough to play in the same league. I don't know if you remember the great Gothenburg side beating Dundee United in the European thing.
1987.
That's the one, yep.
Yeah.
And then you had Roy Hodgson, who was manager of, I think it was Malmo.
Malmo, yeah.
Roy Hodgson was there,
right.
and a guy called Anders Limpar that played with Arsenal.
Yeah.
Had many battles with him. So I've got to say, Swedish football back then was like kind of developing, if you like. Mm-hmm. But to give them credit, Mikey, they chose that their best option was to keep the day job, go to their work and have that trade behind them, and then of course become these full-time footballers at night, which worked very well.
I take it that model's changed now in Swedish football.
Yes,
it's more just full-time football.
More full-time football. It's a different, as you know, it's a whole different ball game now. And but don't be kidded. Malmo back then were a really good side. Gothenburg back then were a really good side.
Well, they went far in European competitions, didn't they? Exactly. Brilliant. And then you get the chance to move back to Scotland. You come to St Mirren. So what was your wee spell at St Mirren like? I've
got to say I had a very happy time at St Mirren. I come back and it was Alex Smith that signed me. A very nice Alex Smith, a real gentleman type character, and a good man manager. And I had a very enjoyable time at St Mirren. We had a fun dressing room. Eventually Tony Fitzpatrick and Frank McGarvey took over from Alec. I've got to say I had a real successful period under Tony, and a real good time at St Mirren. Tony played me in a very offensive position, liked me to get forward and like that play and do what I do best. But St Mirren was very successful, very happy, and of course scoring the goal of the season at Ibrox for St Mirren with a nice wee 25-30 yarder was an added bonus.
Have you got that one on tape?
Oh, of course we have, Mikey, absolutely. Superb. I make the family watch it every single day, and they've no stopped watching it over the last 10 years. I keep reminding them. These two boys of mine, Mikey, It's not like nowadays, like you can, obviously all the footage is online and you can get clips, no problem, but back then, if it wasn't on Sports Scene or Scott Sport, it'd been quite difficult to see footage, eh? Exactly, you need to go into these, as you know, go into these archives, but no, it was certainly, again, looking back, some excellent players in the St Mirren side, and a very good side, and a real good bit of team spirit, which obviously took us through. Brilliant. And then Leicester City comes calling, so you moved down there for 200 grand, I've got, which is a lot of money back then. Yeah. So how did that come about? Well, again, having a very successful time at St Mirren, a very enjoyable time out of the blue, I was contacted by David Pleat, and David took me down to Leicester City. A real quality tactician, a real thinker of the game, David Pleat, a real, imagination was first class. Some of the things that he'd done in training, some of his preparation and the people that he had there. But unfortunately, Mikey, from I think the first week my wife was taken into hospital. She had, I think in the end she had something like 13 threatened miscarriages. We lived in this hotel. I could never settle. She could never settle. It was not a football problem. I just couldn't settle. I was too busy running up to the hospital. We're too busy, dealing with all these threatened miscarriages. And very fortunately, eventually my oldest son was born. And thankfully that all went through well. But it came to a point where she said to me, I want to go back. I'm not settled here. I'm not happy. I've been through too much. And unfortunately, Leicester City ended up being a very short stay. Nothing to do with Leicester. It was a great club. Training ground was first class. David Pleat was excellent. The club was excellent. And eventually when I informed him that my wife was desperate to get back because of the trouble she went through, I think Leicester City then put it out there that we were interested in back to Scotland. And then came the Pars.
Yeah, that's when your career really took off.
My wife and Fife.
Superb. So in October 1990, for a fee of 165 grand, it's again a lot of money, especially for a club like Dunfermline.
Absolutely.
You come up the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Ian Munro and Phil Bonnyman were the managers at that point. And Minnie came in and managed to convince me to go and join the club. I've got to say, looking at the dressing room, there was a great dressing room full of great players. Very difficult period, as you know. And the start of it was difficult for me, Mikey, because I respect every manager, and every manager's got his own thoughts. But I've got to say, I didn't enjoy the sitting midfield role. Not to go over the halfway line. I've got to say, and I don't want to be too critical. This was just the manager's choice. He felt I was a playmaker. I felt that my strength was in the final third or middle two towards the opposition goal. And I never get started really at Dunfermline in the first season. I never really got into the positions that I would like. The things that I could create, the chances that I could create, the goals that I could possibly score. And it was a very strict position that I was in. But at the end of the day, I respect the manager. I tried to do it the best I could. And ultimately, I don't think it was the type of start that I would have liked to have had.
That you kind of mentioned it, you touched on it. That whole first season was frustrating. I think there'd been a lot of unsettlement with the whole Leishman thing just before you come in. So was that kind of still around the dressing room, that whole... So there was all that chat, there was a lot of players who were Leishman players, and then there was Munro players. There was a bit of a divide. So was that kind of there when you went in? Well,
to be honest, it's always difficult. When you go to a new club and there's a number of new players coming in. They call it the Ian Munro men, and then of course you've got the Jim Leishman men. It was never like that. If you look at the players back then, there was a lot of fantastic players right through the side here. Jim Leishman signings. But there was also a lot of excellent players coming from Ian Munro who brought in some very good talent. But it needed time to gel, Mikey.
Yeah.
And it needed time to, if you like, hit the ground running and go. And we never really got that. We just stumbled through it, whether it was because of this perception of a divide or the split. But certainly the camaraderie in the dressing room and the players that were in there, and I could name you
a lot of big characters, eh?
A lot of big characters, all the way through from Ian Westwater, Andy Rhodes, all the way through young John Hillcourt, the young goalkeeper. Fantastic fun with him, Hilly. I see him from time to time at games. You then look at the absolute head case, Raymond Sharp. Sharpie was off his head completely. And then you had kind of Eddie Cunningtons and the Rab Shannons, the Jackie McNamara's. Then, of course, I used to call him Capitano, and sadly we lost him, Norrie McCarthy. Big Davy Moyes, all the way through Ray Farningham, Craig Robertson, Davy Irons, and of course the Ian McCalls and the Derek McWilliams. And the strikers that this club had over the years, Mikey, I've got to say, and I sat and took down some notes last night about these strikers, the George O'Boyles, the Hamish Frenchies, the big Evo Den Beamans.
Aye,
remember
yeah,
that?
Of course.
Roddy Grant's, Sandy Clark was there for a short time when I joined. Eddie Gallagher's, Paul Chalmers, Ian McParlin's, and of course the absolute finally this man Cosma. So you look at that, Mike, and you think to yourself, wow, some great players in there.
What was Cosma like?
He's a quiet lad, this man. Very quiet, very talented. No doubt he was very talented, but he was a very quiet boy. I remember him extremely quiet, but nice man, very nice man, but certainly just went about his business quietly, but certainly was an absolute excellent talent.
Yeah, he's a proper club legend, isn't he?
Absolutely.
Do you remember your debut for Dunfermline?
Remind me, Mikey, remind me.
3rd of November against Hearts in a 1-1 draw. No memories of that one now.
Well, what I can remember is Hearts at that time. Hearts were a very good side back then. If you look at their team in paper, then they had a lot of great players and a very strong team, very, very hard-working team, full of quality. Was it 1-1?
1-1, yeah.
Yeah, a real, and to go there and to pick up that point against a very strong Hearts.
You actually got your first goal against Hearts as well for Dunfermline, which was in February '92.
Well, some people say that I dived for the free kick, Mikey, but I'm not buying that. It certainly wasn't a dive.
You must have been allowed past the halfway line at that point.
Listen, at that point I was in the halfway line. There's absolutely no doubt that I went from that I tried to go from that playmaking, sitting midfield player to a kind of more offensive player, and I remember putting that ball down, and Big Moyes wanted to take the free kick. I told him to go and do one and try to wind me up, but no, I think, was it a free kick, Mikey? I think it was a free kick. Yeah. Free kick into the top left hand corner, I think, and I was delighted to get that goal.
You mentioned him there, Davy Moyes, another big character from that time. What was he like as a player? Did you know he was going to move into that kind of coaching?
He was always
position?
moving into that, because at that point Moyes was always travelling back forward to England, going into coaching courses and things like that. But when as you said, we talked about it earlier, the amount of these players in that squad that went into football management.
I was just going to touch on that. It's quite scary, actually.
And Big Moyes was one of them. I've got to say, just let me touch on the travelling back forward to the west of Scotland, Mikey, because I need to tell you, there wasn't a dull moment when you were travelling with Tommy Wilson, Eddie Cunnington, John Hillcott, Davy Moyes, Scott Leach, Ian McCall, Eddie Gallagher, and then Paul Chalmers. The fun that we had travelling back and forward, picking different cars, stopping halfway through there. It was they were great boys, and you look at in there, the amount of people into coaching is quite remarkable.
It's quite scary. I was looking at that. So you've got guys like Neil Cooper, yourself, Davy Moyes, Ian McCall, Tommy Wilson, Scott Leach, Jackie Mack, all moved into management or coaching just from that one dressing room.
But you see, the one thing you did know, and even playing in that, training in that team, they were all sponges. They were all thinkers. You know, they were more importantly, they were all strong personalities. In that, Mikey, in that dressing room, believe me, and then you look at the Craig Robertsons and the Norrie McCarthys, and as you said, Rab Shannon. Rab's frightened me every single day he came into that training ground. The tough tackling Rab Shannon, but great lad, fantastic boy, and of course the kind of unsung heroes, as you mentioned, Big Tatty Cooper, very sad as well that we lost him, but a real comedian every single morning. And then you had the kind of unsung heroes, Ray Farningham's and Craig Robertson's, Davy Irons, Paul Smithy, Smudger, another one, excellent attitude, very capable of scoring goals. And you look at these players and you think to yourself, real quality players, Hamish Frenchies and the George O'Boyle.
What's your memories of George?
He was a typical, from that background, he could handle himself, George. And he was never the quietest guy in the dressing room. And he always had something to say. But another one, good personality, good fun.
He had bad injuries, didn't he?
Bad injuries, but an excellent striker. But likewise, you say, you know, Roddy Grants, and so Ross Jack was somebody that led the line brilliantly, and along with Ispan Cosma and people like that, was real quality players.
Brilliant, mate. I wanted to touch on October 91. So the Pars got to the League Cup final that year. So first the semi-final against Airdrie, there was a bit of a dubious decision that went in our favour, and it went to penalties, and then we get to the final against Hibs. So what's your memories of the semi-final and then the Hibs game?
Well, building up, remember, I think we had a penalty shootout against St Mirren, I think, early on. We'd won a penalty shootout against St Mirren. We then went into this semi-final against a very strong Airdrie side as well, good quality, good experience. And as you said, we probably on the day probably everybody deserved to go through because they were a better side. But we got that late goal, and then went into that kind of penalty shootout. Very disappointed before that. I think before the game, Ian Munro was sacked, if I remember right.
Yeah, Jockey Scott came in.
Big Jockey came in, that's right, and we'll talk about Jockey, but very disappointed to lose or to see Ian go, because he was, he was real determination to do well, and was always a real thinker of the game. But unfortunately, that's football, and it was sad to see Ian go before the match. And then we get into this penalty shootout, and I'll never forget that big McCarthy scoring that final penalty.
He did, yeah.
And if I remember right, Mikey, I'm sure we all ran to the side. I'm sure we ran to the Pars fans just down behind the goal.
Yeah.
And I remember celebrating down there with Norrie and all the rest of the team, and it was absolutely fantastic. The celebrations, and the Pars fans were going crazy, and very fortunate, but absolutely delighted to get to the final.
It must have been a big relief, because the league campaign wasn't going great, but obviously getting to a cup final.
Well, it was, obviously. That can always help, because as you said, we were very inconsistent in the league campaign, but we certainly went through and come up against, as I said, I think Alloa, St Mirren, if I remember right, difficult games. St Mirren game was a penalty shootout, then of course up against this strong Airdrie side, and then that celebration, that penalty, never forget it. Goalkeeper's bottom right hand corner, I chased after the big so-and-so, and we certainly had a great time in the dressing room after that game.
Brilliant.
Celebrating. And then of course Hibs in the final, which you'll obviously want to talk about.
Yeah, was that a big disappointment, that?
Well, I've got to say, you look at the team on paper, and when you get to finals, it's all about turning up on the day, and it's all about getting the breaks and getting that little bit of lady luck on your way. We just didn't turn up, Mikey. We didn't play to our potential, because if you look at the team, if I remember right, Andy Rhodes in goal, a back four of Tommy Wilson, Norrie McCarthy, Davy Moyes and Raymond Sharp, Derry McWilliams, Craig Roberts and myself, and a young boy called Sinclair. And then up top, Isman Cosman and Scott Leach. And then of course we brought on a very talented, I think I remember, brought on Colley, Ian McCall.
Ian McCall came on, yeah.
Very talented player. That team was more than capable.
What a great team, eh?
Good team. But that's no disrespect. Hibs also had a very good side. They were riddled with good quality, good players. And unfortunately on the day, we just didn't perform to our potential. And it just wasn't our day.
Disappointing, eh? The following season, 92-93, was your best at the club. So you played 39 games that season, scored 10, and scooped up a fair few Player of the Year trophies. So what was that season like for you?
Well, more offensive. I know, and again,
proved, obviously.
No disrespect, as I said, every manager I've played under has had their own opinions, and you try to do the best you can. But I see myself, I've always seen myself as an attacking midfield player. There's no doubt that I could play as a playmaker, and I can link back to front, but I always felt that middle to front was my best strength. I'd probably say to you that's why I eventually moved on to Motherwell and played some of my best football, because Tommy certainly put me in more offensive positions. But that season with Dunfermline, I remember it again. We played a lot of good stuff. I enjoyed the role that I was playing in. I felt happy and comfortable, and I contributed to, as you said, a number of goals, which was great.
And then the following season after that, Jockey Scott leaves, Bert and Dick come in, and you barely play that season. So what was that like for you? Was it injuries, or was it just frustrating trying to get into the team?
Well, no, there was all sorts of things taking place. Obviously, I remember Bert and Dick Campbell come in with, I think Dick's brother was there as well, if I remember right. Pink was there, yes.
Yeah.
Two real characters, both of them. And Bert was just a lovely man. And to be fair to Bert made it clear that he, as he said at the time, they had to get some players out because of wages, because of money. And there was all sorts of things. Just he was building his own team. Obviously, I was one of the players that were looking to move out. And the only thing I would say that I think it could have been handled better. The exit, I think that could have been handled better. But I understood the financial position of the club. Had nothing but respect for Bert Payton and Dick Campbell and Pink. they had their own agenda and they had to do what they had to do.
Yeah, it was quite tough behind the scenes financially, wasn't it?
It was understandable. As I say, it's only when you get into coaching and management do you realise at the time you curse these managers and coaches. And I can say that about all the team, but when you get into coaching and management, you soon realise there's more to it than meets the eye, and you soon realise there's a lot of things that these guys are not in control of. And that's why you sit back and you look back and you think, oh my God, I apologise to some of you guys because I never realised how difficult it was for you. But no, I totally understand. It worked out good for them because they went on and done very well. It worked out good for me because I joined the Motherwell side. There was a fantastic side to play in, and we gave the old firm a good run for our money. And I thoroughly enjoyed my time there.
Brilliant. Before we touch on Motherwell, you played your last game in a 6-0 win against Queen of the South in October '93, and you mentioned it earlier, the car school coming from the west.
Don't go there, Mikey, please.
Is there any funny stories from the dressing room or the car school?
Mikey, what I can say to you, and honestly, I'm going to read some of these names because I could tell you a story. See, Andy Rhodes, I used to give Andy Rhodes stick because Big Rhodesy was the first one before mobile phones came out to have the biggest mobile phone in the world. Right? And funny enough, Mikey, I met Andy Rhodes about 5 weeks ago at Blackpool watching his boy, and his boy scored the goal. Him and his wife were there, and I met Big Andy, and I apologised to Andy because we used to rip Big Rhodesy to shreds. Because back then we called him Billy Big Time. He actually wasn't Billy Big Time, he was miles ahead of the game. And I think the mobile phone at that point, Mikey, I'm not joking you, it must have been 4 sizes the size of an iPhone. And Big Roger was a great lad, another one that was a great character. But Roger had that mobile phone and we used to have a lot of fun with the big man, with him. But if you look at the squad and you talk about funny times, travelling back in that car with Moisey, and especially with Colley. Colley was off his head, Ian McCall, off his head. Eddie Gallagher, completely off his rocker. Tommy Wilson and, as I said, John Hillcoat, these guys, Paul Chalmers, we used to stop off a lot of time. I'm not going to get into details. See, I'm trying to avoid your question.
Aye, that's fine. We can do that off mic.
I'm trying, yeah, we certainly can. But no, I've got to say there was some real Sharpies, I said to you earlier on in the dressing room. Every day you walked in, the Norrie McCarthy's and the Sharpies, and Scott Leach was a real strong character as well, and John Riley, don't tell me about John Riley.
He was a striker, eh? Dundee United boy, aye.
Great lad. A real buzz bomb type character, but he was great fun. Big Roddy Grant was great fun. But yeah, listen, no disrespect to some of the names that I've missed out. Every single one of them gave me great memories, even through the tough times. They were great people. They were great teammates, and we all learned. And looking back at it, we would all have done things differently, and we wish we could rerun it again because there's certainly things that you would do that would make life easier and change them.
Who was the best player and the most underrated, would you say, that never got the credit?
The best player, now I've got to be careful here because I've been threatened. Right. I've been threatened by a guy from Trinent who's a real tough cookie, came up with the coal mining family, and he's warned me, Ian McParland has warned me, if I don't say to you that he was the best player that played at Dunfermline, he's going to knock me out. So I've got to say, just to protect myself, Mikey, I would say to you that Trinent hard man called Ian McParland is the best player that I played with. So I just protect myself on that front. The underrated player, I think if he had more arrogance, I think if he had more belief in himself, he was a quiet guy, an absolute gem of a human being, Hamish French. I think Hamish French, if he had the arrogance and more confidence and belief and wasn't as humble and wasn't as nice, then there's absolutely no doubt that Hamish French was a real talent and a real wonderful player that if he had a different personality. And by the way, Mikey, that's no disrespect, that's just looking at it now from a management point of view. I would say to you that if Frenchie had that kind of different personality, ruthless and horrible and nasty, he's an absolute gentleman, a first class man, and that's probably what held him back, I think, from being a super talent, because he was an extremely good player.
Brilliant. Who's your toughest opponent?
Well, I've got to say many tough ones. hard men type I've played against, but the one that gave me the best education on movement, on how he got on the ball, how to lose markers, the way that he looked over his shoulders and took snapshots. I would say to you that Ray Wilkins was a player that really taught me a lot when I played against him. Trying to mark him, trying to match his runs, the way that he would go and make space for other people and drag you out of areas. I would say to you, Mikey, that I've played against a lot of really tough characters and difficult opponents, but from a education point of view, I would say to you that Ray Wilkins was a real top midfield player, and the way that he got on the ball and the space that he created and the way that he would change direction and just his general play, you can see why he played at the very top level.
And that was at the end of his career, wasn't it?
And that was at the end of his career. And that's what's interesting about it. Even at the end of his career, Ray Wilkins, very talented, a fantastic brain, real quality technique. But it's just the way that he done it. It's the way that he would leave me standing dead. How I wanted to get close to him. I wanted to go and kick him sometimes, Mikey, and I couldn't get to him. And just the way that he flicked things round corners and played things different sides, switched a play and linked to play. Thanks for the education. And another one that was sadly lost.
What's your memories of the old East End Park, mate? With the old steps and the old track, the gravel track.
That track in the snow, that's what I remember. I remember running around the track at the snow doing some runs. Never forget it was absolutely terrible. Obviously the atmosphere in the ground back then, it was great. That, you know, the supporters were always up for every game, and I've got to say that when you sit down and you look at the kind of characters back then, I'd like to mention one or two people that gave me great memories in the old Dunfermline Stadium. People like a very enjoyable physio, Pip Yates. Pip was a character, fun in games all the time. Reserve coach Jimmy Thompson, a real nice man. Every time you worked with Jimmy was always super helpful. And then of course the very funny Stuart Hogg, our fitness coach, Hoggy.
He's still in the go, is he not?
Oh, listen, and still get the same hairdo. He still get the same hairdo, but Stuart Hogg was a great guy to work with. And of course the very famous Joe Nelson. Joe was a real character that helped you out all the time, and another one that was just constantly through thick and thin a real Dunfermline man.
Yeah, he was. Another one sadly missed. Just final question on your time at the Pars. You played under obviously 3 managers in 3 seasons. What was that like as a player, dealing with that? Different approaches, obviously, different training, different methods.
Yeah, it's a good question, Mikey, because you go in there and I work with Ian Munro and Phil Bonnyman. Again, Ian Munro was a real thinker. Another one that was not afraid to try things in the training ground. There was all these training sessions where you can see there was thought in it. And he had a good assistant in Phil Bonnyman. Phil was a kind of a player's man, if you like, a good communicator, and he done that. And again, a good partnership. You then move on to a real tough character in Jockey Scott. Jockey was a real disciplinarian, but Jockey was, he's in your face. He never missed you when you done something wrong. But again, he had what I felt was a wonderful training ground coach, Gordon Wallace. And Gordon, believe it or not, Mikey, I've got a lot of his training sessions sitting in my study in the house, because a lot of his stuff that came from Jim McLean and Dundee United, you could see why they were very successful. Gordon Wallace's training was excellent. Another man that was very educational and movements and runs and positions. Then of course the very nice Bert Payton and the great fun Dick and Pink Campbell, 2 real characters that had that spirit to bring in laughter and do what they do. And then of course Bert was a real gentleman and a real good man management, but I never, unfortunately, working at that time, we really never got to know each other. There was an agenda that was there. Things had to be done. It was time to move, and I never got a chance. But every single one of them, Mikey, brought something different and all their own strengths. Just like myself as a manager and any other coach, you've got your strengths, but you've also got your weaknesses.
Yeah, brilliant, mate. And then you leave in '94. Tommy McLean, your former Rangers coach, takes you to Motherwell. So what was your spell like at Motherwell as a player?
Very enjoyable. Started off very difficult, went in there having not played much. Again, a really good dressing room, and Tommy was a great tactician, very clever in the game. His sidekick, he always stayed out the road of, even in training games. Big Tom Forsyth, he was always booting you. He would threaten to kick you. But I've got to say, after settling down when I first joined the club, I then joined a great side, a really good side, full of good players, and probably brought out the best in me, I think, playing in that offensive area. And I thoroughly enjoyed my time at Motherwell.
Brilliant. And then you start moving into a youth coach position. So by this point, you're already thinking about moving into management in your next stage in the game.
Well, what's interesting, Mikey, is that even in my early 20s, I always had a love. I can show you the pre-seasons. In 1979 and 80, I can show you the pre-season runs and training sessions that I've done with John Gregg, Jock Wallace, and of course Graham Souness. I always took notes. I always liked to go home and write things down. And then in the mid-20s, it started off by somebody asking me to take a training session for a junior team, amateur team, boys club team, girls team. I even coached council teams. And I used to go out twice a week and do coaching. And I'd done it with all sorts of standards and all sorts of shapes and sizes. And I think that gave me great education. And then, of course, I joined Motherwell, and I was asked to get involved in under 15s, under 18s, and eventually under 21s. Stevie Hamill, James McFadden, Stephen Pearson, young players that came through, worked with them. And then, of course, at 33, got the tap on the shoulder from John Boyle and asked to become the player manager at Motherwell, which was a very difficult decision.
I was going to ask, what was that like being a player manager? It must be tricky, because we go back to the John Gregg thing earlier. 1 minute you're the teammate, and next minute you're the manager. So how did you cope with that?
Well, I've got to say the player management thing I was never keen on, because I didn't think you could do the two jobs. I think the jobs really need your full focus. You have to stand back and watch. It's always nice to have an experienced player in the middle of the pitch being able to do that. So I decided, Mikey, and I do believe that I stopped playing too early. But when you get offered the Premier League job at 33, it's a difficult one to turn down. You go in there and your eyes are wide shut. You do the things that you think you can do, but you really don't know, particularly off the pitch. You don't know the kind of ins and outs of what takes place. But the training sessions and the setup and the kind of dealing with players. And at that point, again, I was working with some real characters, the Andy Gorhams and the Jed Brannans and the Sean Teals and the John Spencers. And well, they wanted to be the third force. John Boyle came in and that was his intention with Pat Nevin as a player chief executive. And that was another whole new experience, working with that situation. So, as I say, you go in there very naively and you try to do the best you can, but it was another great education, but certainly a very tough time in relation to taking over that as a young manager and really just learning the ropes. But I enjoyed it, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
What did you learn the most in those early days?
Well, what I learned the most was that there's a whole lot more off the pitch to this game than what people realise. And as you go through your management career, you soon recognise that football can be a very political place. You've got to learn the politics and find out the politics very quickly. And they say it's a results-driven business, Mikey. It's not always the case. And not all managers get sacked because of results. And there's many things that take place in clubs. But as a young coach, I've got to say I thoroughly enjoyed, and I do appreciate and respect getting the opportunity from Motherwell. But now that I'm a bit more experienced, looking back at it, you soon recognise there's a whole range of things that you should have and could have done. But listen, Mikey, we all live and learn.
That's it. And then after Motherwell, you get the chance to go down to Preston. Former Scotland manager Craig Brown takes you down. So Craig Brown, another guy we've sadly lost. What was Craig like?
Well, again, it was right out the blue where I got a call from Craig asking to go down to Preston North End as a first team coach. I just come out of the Motherwell experience. As he used to remind me every day, Mikey, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but he used to tell me 3 World Cups, 2 European Championships, and I think it was something like 79 international matches, something like that.
I think that's about right, yeah.
Massive experience. Thoroughly enjoyed my time with Craig. He taught me an awful lot on and off the pitch.
What did you learn from him?
He was a fantastic people person, not just with the players but with staff. A very kind person, would certainly look after everyone and make sure everybody's looked after. Off the pitch, he was so experienced that he just knew how to handle all the aspects of football that he needed to handle. Very good with the press, very good with the board, and you know, off that pitch was somebody that taught me an awful lot of things on how to go about things and what he done. But he had his own personality, and that was just Craig, the nice man, the kind of great man manager, good man manager, very good people person, and very thankful for the opportunity he gave me, and very sad to lose him.
I'm guessing he was the type of guy the players would have loved him, eh? Like, not a lot of players would have gone against Craig Brown.
No, because he was not confrontational. You know, he was a man that, don't get me wrong, you know, he could certainly stand up for himself, Craig, and when he had to, he would do what he had to do. But in general, he was just a very nice man and a non-confrontational guy that would find ways to sort things out.
And then Craig goes from Preston, you take over as manager. So what was it like in those early days managing in England compared to Scotland, for example?
Well, I remember going to Craig, Mikey. I did want to leave with Craig, and Craig approached the Preston board. I felt that Craig brought me in, it was only right for me to leave with Craig. I did try and leave. Craig said to me, believe it or not, that he did approach the board refused because there was a bit of player power at that time. I think the players wanted me to step into this caretaker manager's role. So Craig went to the board refused, and then eventually Craig sat me down and said to me, look Billy, I've got a pension that can choke a horse. You're a young man with a family, sit tight, and if you get offered the job, take the job, you've got my blessing. And that's how it came about, Mike. And eventually I went in as caretaker. I kept in touch with Craig, and Craig was guiding me nicely, and eventually became the manager of Preston, and I thoroughly enjoyed that experience.
It was a great time for you that at Preston, eh? You got the club, was it in the playoffs? A few times, eh?
Yeah, 2 playoffs back to back. Took over the from Craig, obviously. Got a great response for the players. Got to 2 playoffs. An excellent side, fantastic side. Riddleby experienced players. Riddleby, real talented players. And I've got to say, the couple of years I had working with Craig, and then a couple of years I had as a manager, I had 4 fantastic, enjoyable years at Preston North End.
Brilliant. It's a big club, eh? People probably didn't realise up here how big, like the history of Preston.
People don't realise how big these clubs are. These clubs are, as you said, they've got that wonderful history. They've also got their own traditions. But they're huge clubs, huge training grounds, massive squads in the sense of salaries and what they're paying, etc. And people in Scotland don't realise that these clubs are enormous clubs, and there's plenty of them, Mikey. If you look in the Championship, even League One, have a look at League One at the minute. The Ipswich Towns and the Sunderlands, and I mean, these are huge supporting clubs.
Love players on maybe 30 grand a week at these clubs.
Incredible. So it's an honour to manage them, and you soon find out when you get in there. You know, you're getting the great Sir Tom Finney put in your face, reminding you, the Bobby Charltons and the Craig Browns and the Davy Moyses. You're following some real big names and very successful people, and it's a great challenge.
How did you find it in England? It's so competitive, there's so many games, it's a Tuesday, Saturday, like every week. You're travelling all the time. How did you find that, like travelling all over the country constantly? There's
a lot of games, and you know, there's plenty, three matches a week, 2 matches a week. You get to the Christmas period and it's just not Christmas and New Year's non-stop. It's a long, long season. There's lots of ups and lots of downs you've got to accept. There's good runs and bad runs. But it's a very probably the most competitive in the world, I would think, because of the spend and the stadia and the training grounds and the depth of squad. You know, for example, at Preston, I think our wage bill was just over 5 million when we got to the final against West Ham. West Ham's wage bill was 38 million.
Yeah.
So there's massive differences, Mikey, but certainly huge clubs.
We are Flow Digital Pharmacy, and we are proud to sponsor the Walking Down the Holbeath Road podcast. Our easy-to-use app is a convenient way to access your NHS prescription medication, and our team of trained pharmacists are helping thousands of people to access the support and medication they need. If you're registered with a GP who's based in England, you can use the Flow app to securely and conveniently send them NHS medication requests and arrange delivery to a location of your choice at a time that suits you. This means you can avoid the hassle of contacting your GP and making unnecessary round trips to eventually collect your prescription. Find out more at weareflow, spelled PHLO, that's weareflow.com.
You leave Preston, you go to Derby in 2006. Again, brilliant time at Derby. You get to Premiership via the playoffs. So what was your time like at Derby?
Well, again, you leave Preston, and believe it or not, I'd agreed to join Charlton in the Premier League just after Alan Curbishley. I came to an agreement with the board at that time, and when I got home, I spoke to Derby County and one or two other clubs, and I made a football decision, not a financial decision, because financially the Charlton offer was much better, but I made a football decision. I felt that the Derby County challenge was a good challenge, blank sheet of paper. You know, there was a great willingness to get to the Premier League over a 3-year period, and I decided that Charlton, for me and my staff, would be the kind of challenge that we needed. Sadly, Mikey, the promotion came 2 years too early. We weren't quite ready for the Premier League. You never refuse it, of course. The plan was clear, 3-year plan, top mid-table first year, top 10 second, and of course promotion third. But after 11 months, here we are, standing at Wembley.
In the bright lights.
Ready to go for the richest game of football, the richest game in world football. And again, it was a wonderful experience and a great memory.
Brilliant. Another big club, Derby. The history again with Derby with Clough. And we'll go on to obviously Forest with Clough.
Yeah, huge club, a huge stadia. Training ground was exceptional. Big fan base, big expectation. Again, you've got Brian Clough crammed down your throat just to remind you of the great times in the past, and the Arthur Coxes, the famous Arthur Cox at that time. So you step into these clubs and you know what's expected, and you know the expectation, and you know the challenge you've got. But I've got to say, Mikey, it's something that's always excited me. You know, I go in there with great confidence that we can turn it around and do what we do, and it was a great challenge. Unfortunately, as I said, when we got to the Premier League, sadly it became a selling club, an outgoing board, and when you go into the Premier League, you need that commitment at the top level, at the top of the club. You need that support, and unfortunately, as an outgoing board, their agenda and our agenda became slightly different.
It's important, I'm guessing, as a management team to have a board and management team that communicate well, get on well, agree on decisions. That must be so massive for you as a manager at any club. To be a success, you need to be all on the same page, don't you?
Well, the difficulty from their point of view, and you've always got to stand in other people's shoes, I think. You know, you've got to sit sometimes and think what it's like to be a reporter, what's it like to be a manager, what's it like to be a director, a sporting director, whatever it may be. You've got to try, a kit man, you've got to try and sometimes stand in people's shoes. Now, unfortunately, the Derby board decided that they would cash in. That's their prerogative, that's up to them. And sadly for me as a manager, and the players and the staff and the supporters, unfortunately for us, you know, when we first joined the club, the agreement was if we did get to the Premier League, we would be a competitive Premier League club. I understand that decisions and goalposts move, and unfortunately we worked in very difficult conditions where it was an outgoing board, a new board was coming in to bring in their own people. And I'm telling you now, Mikey, I only visited the Premier League. I wasn't in the Premier League because there was never a chance to have a real go at the Premier League, because of obviously the agenda that was there and what was taking place.
Out with your control, eh?
Yeah.
So you leave Derby and you go to Nottingham Forest. You have 5 years over 2 spells there. And I mentioned them earlier. It's a massive club, Forest.
Different type of club. Forest is much more traditional. Derby is very cosmetic. A very cosmetic stadium, very cosmetic training ground. Forest is more traditional.
It's got that history around
History,
the
still the
stadium,
same. Still the same boot room and the same corridors that the famous Brian Clough worked in. But another one, huge club, lovely training ground, a more old-fashioned type stadium back then. Huge support worldwide and big expectation. And again, thoroughly enjoyed my time, both times at Forest, and some great memories.
It must be, I always think this for any Nottingham Forest manager, it must be a nightmare in a way, because you've always got that spell under Clough, the European Cups and the success. It's always hanging over a manager, isn't it, at that club?
Even the dugouts, Mikey, you sit in the technical area in the dugouts, so you have to go down and you sit down, and it's still the same. It's still the same dugouts, you remember, where Cloughie jumped out and slapped the boy in the face on the touchline, and it's still the same situation. So, you know, and even walking in the front door at the City Ground, sometimes I felt like booting that statue of his face off of that kind of little podium thing, you know. But it just reminds you of the famous players that they had, the famous European successes, the wonderful sides of the you know, the team that they had, and all the great players that they had. And it certainly was a joy, particularly in my first time. It was a joy, first of all, saving them relegation and then taking them to 2 playoffs. And it was a joy watching and working with the players and the staff and the board at that time. Very, very, very successful time.
Quite a special club, eh? When the fans are singing that Mulligan Tyre at pre-kick-off as well, it must be goosebumps, that.
It's a joy, because it really does. It rocks the place. And it's a famous song, as you know. And when it's sang at full voice, and there's 32,000, 34,000 in there, then it certainly does send shivers down the back of your neck.
Brilliant. You see, with the Derby and Forest thing, it's a big derby, obviously. They don't like each other, eh? So what were their games like? Managing against vice versa? Probably
more petty than the Old Firm here.
Right.
I mean, real hatred. Real. And I know there's hatred in Rangers and Celtic. But there's a different type with Derby and Forest. And, you know, they certainly hate each other.
Like poisonous?
Yeah, I would say it is. Yeah, I would say there certainly is, and it's you know, it's difficult to explain, Mikey. But you know, sometimes you just look at it, you think to yourself, "Oh my God, I didn't realise this was quite as venomous." And it certainly is. And when Derby come to the City Ground, or when Forest go to Pride Park, then it's a real cauldron of pressure. And there certainly is plenty toxic emotions in there.
What's that like as a manager? Say the week building up to a derby, obviously it means so much to the supporters. Do you approach that different as a manager? Like, are you speaking to the players more about we need to get one over Derby or Nottingham Forest, or how do you approach that?
It's just, I'll be honest, Mikey, it becomes just another game. You've got to just, as I said, prepare properly. You've got to keep the players and staff relaxed and focused, and you prepare for the game, and you know what you're going into every game, whether it's Millwall away or whether it's West Brom at West Brom. You know what you're stepping into. You know about the stadia, you know about the support, what type of support, you know what these clubs traditionally are all about. So when you're preparing for this Derby match, Derby Forest or Forest Derby, then you've got to just try and keep the mind on the game.
Be focused and relaxed.
Keep the focus, keep it relaxed, and make sure that we're not getting overhyped and we're not going to come out there like 2 kickboxers.
Aye, if you're too emotional, eh?
Yeah, we've got to make sure that our preparation is key, and we've got to play our style of play and try and force our qualities on them. And I think that's a big factor for managers in getting into these types of games.
What grounds did you like going to when you were managing down south?
Oh, there was lots of I loved West Ham. West Ham was a
Old Upton Park.
Oh, it was an exciting place to go. West Brom was a great place to go. Sunderland. I took plenty of stick at Millwall, I've got to say.
That must be a tough place to go.
And I've got to say, the Millwall fans were hilarious, Mikey. And I'll never forget going to Millwall, and when you walk out of the tunnel at Millwall, you take a left, and then you walk up about 10 yards, and the dugout's just there. But over that dugout is all the kind of, if you want to call, the die-hard Millwall fans. And I remember stepping out the kind of tunnel area, Mike, and I just took a left, and the next minute all the Millwall fans to my left started singing "Hi Ho," and I swear to God, I joined in with the song. You just got to have a laugh, eh? And I started walking down, Mikey. I started walking down trackside, and they were singing the "Hi Ho" song, and of course I was giving it step by step, "Hi Ho, Hi Ho," and it was hilarious, absolutely hilarious. And
that's the best way to engage with that, isn't it? You didn't react to it.
Like, to be fair to the Millwall fans, when I done that and I joined in with them, and I kind of gave that funny walk, and of course they were in full chant. Once they stopped, they all came down to the technic here, and they were all saying to me, "Billy, listen, absolutely fantastic.
Class,
that was great stuff, Baba." So you've got to do that, because every stadium, whether it's Reading at Reading or even at Preston, you go to Preston, you go to Derby, you go to Forest, Plymouth away, they've all got their own crowd, they've all got their own kind of a atmosphere, and of course you've just got to prepare for the traditions that they've had and the kind of environment you walk into.
So keeping in management, so far you've had 478 games in management with a 40.8% win ratio. So just speaking a bit about management, how would you describe your style of management?
I remember Darren Moore saying to me after the Wembley win, and Darren Moore was a vastly experienced player, and the one thing that he said to me, he thanked me for my transparency, because when I first went in, I pulled Muro aside and I said to him, "We need to up your training sessions." You know, Stephen Bywater, I had words with him, Michael Johnson had words with him, and I think the great thing and the very great compliment I got was from Darren Moore when he said to me that my transparency to the players and my honesty to the players was something that they respected greatly, and there was never any disrespect, but I had to be honest, I had to be transparent, and I would say that in my man's management skills, Mike, is probably my strength.
It's so important, man management, eh? There's so many managers you hear about who maybe are great practitioners or great on the training ground, but they don't have that personal touch, they don't have that relationship with players.
I think it's a balance and a blend. You can't always. You sometimes, I used to have experienced players saying to me, "Gaffer, you need to come in at half time and give the players a rollicking, because every time you've done it, we went out in the second half and performed." So there is a place to go in at half time and raise your voice and have a go at one or two, but at the same time too, you've got to be, there's a different style of management required now. Players are different, and young players are certainly different, so you've got to get that balance, Mikey, and make sure that you pick and choose the right moments to be the soft touch, or the other end of the scale, you've got to get in there and you've got to be that very strong leader that's basically shaking the place up.
And it's like you said to me earlier about psychology as well in the game now. Approaching that is totally different, eh?
Well, you've got to. I tell the famous story that I remember getting in at half time at the City Ground and saying to Wes Morgan, "I'm going to pick a fight with you. I'm going to come at you. I want you to come at me, and let's get the whole place diving for cover." So, and Wes and I went in, and I went for Wes's throw, and of course Wes has stood up, 6'5", up the way, 6'5" across the way, and here's this 5'6" guy.
You're from Glasgow.
That's the difference, Mikey. He balled it, as you can imagine. But no, so you've got to play games sometimes. You've got to try and motivate people, and they all know, all the guys, and that's why I've got great contacts with players and staff, speaking to the bus driver that I've had for a long time at Preston, still chatting to secretaries and all sorts of people, ground staff at the club, at the clubs that I've been at. Still great contacts, Mikey, because, as I said to you right at the start of the show, I don't forget where I come from. I know what it's like being brought up in Glasgow with a humble mother and father that are working hand to mouth week in, week out. So you've got to treat people the right way, but at the same time too, you've got to be a strong manager when you need to be, but at the same time too, you've got to be sympathetic and you've got to understand that everybody's different.
Yeah, 100%. And we mentioned him earlier, Alex Ferguson. He had the same approach, didn't he? He knew the girl on reception's name, the tea lady. the guys in the kit room, knew everybody, said good morning to everybody as well. It was so important, wasn't it?
Very, very. He was obviously, Ali come up in a different era. If you remember the great Aberdeen side, you know, that was a real tough side with the Strackens and the McLeish's and the McGee's and the Eric Blacks and the Dougie Rugby's. You know, these guys were, they Aberdeen at that point, driven by Fergie's, if you like, hard-nosed approach. That's what made them successful. And to be fair to Alec in his early days didn't hold back. He was more kind of iron-fisted, and back then you could get away with it a lot more than you could today. And I'm sure if Alec managed today, I'm sure Alec would say that he would also need to change today and do things slightly different.
Totally. How did you handle pressure as a manager?
I enjoyed it, to be honest, Mikey. I enjoyed. Listen, when you buy the ticket, you know what to expect. I know it. You know what this game's all about. You know what it's all about on the pitch, off the pitch. You know what you're dealing with the expectation. You know the games that you're going into. You know the stage of the season, and the pressure changes when you're on a 5-game win. Then you know that the big blue sky's there. But when you're on a 3-game, 4-game, 5-game loss, then you know that the vultures are hovering. So you know what to expect, but you've just got to prepare well. You've got to be true to yourself and the people you work with, and you've got to stick to your beliefs and continue to do the best you can.
Has there been a player over your career that is touted as the next big thing, and everybody's super excited about this player, and then all of a sudden it just doesn't work out for them? So any of that's stuck out for you?
Yeah, I think there's 2 players that jump out at me. A boy called Giles Barnes at Derby County, young boy. Barnesy was a very powerful, very quick, very strong, very talented. Sadly, picked up a bad injury. But Giles Barnes is a player that could have went all the way to the top, and unfortunately he picked up this injury. I think he eventually went to America, played in America. But an excellent player, a wonderful talent, and somebody that I think if he hadn't picked up that injury and got that little bit of break, he could have been sensational. The other one I would say to you is at Forest, a boy called Lewis McGugan, a real, again, different type of player for Barnesy, probably more technical, not as strong and quick and powerful, but excellent set piece taker, wonderful technical player, and a player that I think this lad probably should have went higher if he had got the right breaks and found himself at the right place at the right time. And these 2 young boys certainly were a joy to work with, very talented, but certainly could have went a lot higher than what they did.
Brilliant. What advice would you give to someone who's maybe starting out in coaching and wants to move into management?
You can read as many books as you like, and you can watch as many podcasts or listen to many podcasts and watch as many videos, and you always certainly have to be I feel like a student of the game, but you've got to stick by your own principles, your own beliefs, and don't be afraid to make those strong decisions. Certainly be a good listener, listen to your staff, but ultimately you've got to make strong decisions, and you've got to show the club that you're capable of standing on your own 2 feet and making those decisions, but at the same time too, be that student of the game. Keep learning, keep educating, keep doing the courses, and keep listening and keep in contact with many different people and get advice, but make your own choices.
Brilliant, mate. Superb advice. Who's been your best ever signing?
I would probably say to you, a boy called David Nugent was a wonderful signing.
Plays for England, didn't he?
Played for England. Nuge, yeah.
Sure, he scored actually.
That's right. David Nugent at Preston was a real pleasure. Quick, strong, great finisher, great lad, Scouser, never a dull moment, very funny, good personality. I think we bought him for around about the 99,000 mark. I think the club eventually sold him for over 6 million. So I've got to say that he was a great investment, and Preston got a great return for him, and a wonderful talent, a real street boy. But every day he came in, he always had a story to tell, and he was a pleasure to work with.
Superb. What's your thoughts on football today and how it's changed, especially from your playing days, for example?
No hiding place, Mikey. no hiding place, because now, whether it's inside the club with the heart monitors, the sports science that you've got to deal with, the video analysis that you've got to deal with, you're playing all the games, and every game is now Sky Sports with 20 different cameras at different places. And now all of a sudden there's no hiding place. And the difference now is your preparation and how you conduct yourself, how you behave, how you prepare. I think that's a big difference. Back then, Mikey, when I first started, as you said, with sports scene, Scott Sport, whatever it was back then. And you had the newspapers that reported in the games. There wasn't any social media. So there's now a different approach, and you've got to be very, very aware that you're under scrutiny 24/7. And your preparation and how you go about things has got to be spot on.
What's your thoughts on social media?
It's here, and sadly for me, I got involved. I was at, I think, Forest when this first kicked off. So it's a good place for people to hide, as you know. It's a good place to tell half-truths or to spin stories and yarns and not have to, if you like, justify with facts. And it allows people to come out there and abuse the situation. And it's you've just got to accept that anybody that thinks they can believe a word of social media, they're living in cuckoo land. And you've just got to accept it's here. It's a nice place for the colours to stay and spend their time. And it's a nice place for them to come out and spread nonsense and never have to justify it.
Yeah, it's very easy. It's a dangerous world.
Very.
What's your thoughts on VAR?
I think it's nonsense. I think the VAR is now proven to be a failed system. I don't think it's good for the game. I don't think it's good for the fans. I think it's proven already that it's not working. And the quicker they take it away, Mikey, the better, because ultimately referees are human and make mistakes. They can get it wrong. The same way as you know, I do believe in goal line technology. I think that's important. But certainly the VAR system and how they've tried to introduce it, I certainly think the quicker they get rid of it, the better.
It's taking the fun out of the game, eh? You see players now, they score a goal and they feel like they can't even celebrate because they think it's just going to go to the VAR.
Well, you can't celebrate. You'd be stupid to celebrate, but you can't help your emotions. It just takes over. And we took that lovely feeling of watching the ball hit the back of the net and then running away with your teammates and celebrating. Now all of a sudden you've got to stop and you've got to think, is this going to VAR? And no, I'll make it. Look, it doesn't work. Let's not be kidded here. It's not good. No. And I understand why it was brought in. I understand what they tried to achieve from it. But it's like everything. People make mistakes. People make decisions. And we've just got to allow referees and people like that to be in that position on that day and to call what they've seen. And sometimes they will get it wrong. And the quicker we get back to that, for me, the better. That
was an important part of the game, that, eh? It gave supporters something to chat about. Even though you'd be frustrated, maybe you might have got a penalty, the boys are way back to the pub to talk about the game, and now that's just gone now.
But remember, we used to say, didn't we, over the season, it'll work for and work against you. And
of course,
it did.
Yeah.
So sometimes the human error will work against you, but as the season goes on, the human error falls on your side. So it was always a case of, you know, working and balancing itself out over the season. So no, I think hopefully, Mikey, they come to some common sense and they take it back to where it was.
Can you see that happening with the money that's been involved in it?
Well, it's difficult because you and I don't know what's involved contractually and financially, and we really don't know what's behind this, Mikey. But certainly from a football point of view, from a fan point of view, from a player point of view, and then of course coaches and so on, then let's hope it gets scrapped and it goes away. But certainly whether it can be done from a financial point of view or another point of view that you and I don't know, then we'll just have to wait and see.
Brilliant. Fingers crossed, mate. Last couple of questions. Who has been the biggest influence in your career?
I would say to you that Dave Sexton played a huge part on my love for management. I watched this guy work and the way he spoke to people, the imagination that he had. The way that he worked with his players, very, very clever. Preparation was excellent. And just as a young player, I always kind of liked this guy. This guy always struck me. And then, of course, there's two other people I would say. My dad, certainly, with the amount of support that he gave me through my playing career. And then, of course, the management. My dad played a huge part by getting me the boots and the strips at Christmas, taking me out into the grass and working in football, getting me the ball. And my dad, my mum and dad, certainly my dad played a huge part. And of course, I had a great mentor, Mikey, a guy who was chief scout at Manchester United for 50 odd years, a guy called Jimmy Dickey. Jimmy's the one that took me down to Manchester United when I was kind of 12, 13 years of age. We would travel back and forth to Manchester every school holiday, and we would go down there and spend days and weeks down there. We'd talk lots, he would educate me lots. Sadly, I made the wrong choice through homesickness. It was a bad mistake not going to Manchester United, but we did remain friends through my management and through my coaching, up to the point where Jimmy eventually passed away, sadly. But what he taught me, the things he would tell me about the signings he made, the Brian McClairs, the Gordon McQueens, the Martin Buckens, the Gordon Strackens, how he would watch them home and away, and what he would look for as a proper scout who travelled all over the country, home and away, and watched these guys over dozens and dozens of games. So I'd say these three people: Dave Sexton, my father, Billy Davies, and of course my great mentor Jimmy Dickey. These three played a huge part on my joy and my love for this game.
Superb, mate. Just another quick question about what would you look for in a player in recruitment?
Well, it's difficult because when you go through the side, you join a club, Mikey, and there's lots of strengths and some weaknesses in your side, and you've got to sit down and decide what kind of character. First of all, you need the right character in your team. The personality is very important. You bring in, first of all, a first-class human being. That's important. Somebody that's going to come into the club and be that right type of person that you want to bring in. Then, of course, you look at the position, you look at the strength, whether it be the pace or the technical side or the size or the speed, whatever it may be. And you sit down and you try and put together this jigsaw puzzle. And you can only do that once you're inside a training ground, watching these players day in, day out. And then, of course, looking at the team performances. And then you can start to strategise on what type of player you need, what strengths you want to bring to the side. And then, of course, more importantly, do you want to bring in a quiet one, or do you want to bring somebody that's going to shake the dressing up with that personality and kind of camaraderie? So you've just got to look at it, but look at it very carefully and look at it over a period of time.
Brilliant. Final question, what's next for Billy Davies?
What's next, Mikey? I said to you earlier on, I got a little bit disenchanted away back around about the 2014 mark. I then found myself involved in some serious family illnesses that I had to overcome and sort out. I've spent the last number of years, as I said to you, Liverpool University, a year it took me, in a diploma in football management. I decided then to look at all sorts of women's football, disabled football, mental health, psychology, first aid, etc, etc. I re-educated myself on all the continued personal development. And you get to a point, Mikey, where you just know it's time to get back. The passion's back, the focus is back, the energy's back. And I'm now ready to go, Mikey. I'm ready to go. I can't wait for the next chapter. I can't wait for the next challenge. And I'm looking forward to stepping back onto that training ground with the boots and the tracksuit on, and working with players, working with staff, and hopefully seeing some joy in the fans' faces again.
Brilliant. Well, hopefully we'll see you back in the game soon, Billy. And it's again been a pleasure sitting down and have a chat with you.
Mikey, it's been a pleasure. Thanks very much for your time. And as you know, looking back at my old club, I wish them well. I watch them and watch the result every week. As I said to you, I was nearly there last Friday, to watch their game. I certainly will pick up one or two of their games over the next number of months. And I wish them well, and I wish everybody at the club well.
Well, let us know when you're coming back. Well, warm welcome back to East End Park.
Top man, thanks very much for your time.
Remember to subscribe to Walking Down the Holbeath Road on your favourite podcast platform. Producer of this podcast was Jan Motkiewicz and music was supplied by Stuart Dusty Miller. Thank you for listening to this episode with Billy Davies. Sure you'll agree it was a fascinating insight into his career and his life in football. Finally, we would like to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year when it comes. And we'll be walking down the Holbeath Road with another former Pa next month.